The Premier League era has seen a couple of managerial rivalries, each one taking a bit of a different shape. There was Mourinho versus Wenger, and before that, Wenger versus Ferguson, and now it's looking like Guardiola versus Klopp will rival the previous rivalries. And before the Arsenal and United supporters get triggered by the title, we're going to explore this. It's a very different kind of rivalry to that of Ferguson versus Wenger, and we'll be sure to explain that in this video, don't you worry. I'm Adrian, by the way. Be sure to subscribe if you're new around here for plenty of football coverage weekly, minimum 3 videos per week, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, sometimes live streams. Videos on topics from across the world of football. With Jurgen Klopp committing to Liverpool for a few more years just yesterday, it felt right to look at this potentially great competitive rivalry we have brewing between City and Liverpool. But first, without a doubt, the original Big Daddy managerial rivalry in the Premier League era was Sir Alex Ferguson versus Arsene Wenger. At one time, it was a competitive rivalry. Well, sorry, I should rephrase that. It was always a competitive rivalry, but when Arsenal began to fall off just a little bit, season by season, following their invincible run, United continued to win all kinds of competitions, always there or thereabouts when it came to the Premier League title, etc. Despite the historic rivalry between United and Liverpool, it was United versus Arsenal that began to take center stage as the marquee matchup. The comments off of the pitch from the managers, the hate between the two lieutenants of Keane and Vieira, the explosiveness of the matches, how they would take turns spoiling the party for each other as well. Giggs scoring that wonder goal in the FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal in '99. Sylvain Wiltord scoring the league-clinching goal at Old Trafford in 2002. United ending Arsenal's unbeaten run, which led to Pizzagate, which was later revealed to be Cesc Fabregas throwing that slice of pizza at Sir Alex Ferguson's face. But prior to the fall-off in form from Arsenal, the rivalry was both competitive and personal between the two managers of the serial winning teams. Later, it just kind of became personal. In fact, Arsene Wenger himself has said that he hated Ferguson at that time. As he mentioned in his book, quote, "The competition makes you hate the opponent. I think he certainly hated me, and I hated him sometimes as well. Whenever we competed, it was always a fight, always very tight and nervous. And don't forget, we also had to deal with Fergie time. But when the competition is over, what remains is a deep respect for guys like him, for what they have achieved and how long they have stayed in the job and dedicated their lives to it." The rivalry at this time was more heated, not something you see as often within the Premier League, and we'll go over why later. But Wenger versus Ferguson was a special rivalry, and while Mourinho versus Wenger provided some iconic moments such as Mourinho's infamous voyeur quotes directed at Wenger, those were awesome, the tie flip that shook the world, and some others I'm probably forgetting, but by this time, Arsenal was already on a decline compared to their early 2000s form, and I mean, when the tie flip happened during Mourinho's second stint at Chelsea, they were simply an FA Cup team that would fight for the top 4 given the increased quality of the league, going from a big 4 to a big 6, etc. Am I the only one that feels like Guardiola has been in England for longer than Klopp for some reason? I think it might be because Klopp, who came to England in October of 2015, had much more work to do with this Liverpool squad before it could be considered reasonable to expect them to win trophies. City's squad, on the other hand, when Guardiola arrived in 2016, was much closer to a title-winning squad, and with a couple of signings, they won the league and the first of many league cups to get them on their way in their second season. Plenty more trophies would follow, including that formidable season. Klopp, on the other hand, as mentioned, had a complete squad overhaul to oversee before winning his first trophy with the club, the Champions League in 2019. Not bad, to be honest. Since then, he has been a thorn in the side of Pep Guardiola domestically, or a pain in his ass, rather, as Guardiola himself has said, quote, "They are our biggest rivals in the last seasons. They are always there. They are a pain in the ass." Now, similarly, Klopp has spoken of how if it wasn't for Guardiola, he'd probably have many more trophies. As he has said, quote, "If I would be a different person, I would be probably a little bit depressed about the fact that Pep Guardiola is constantly coaching these kind of teams. Maybe in Dortmund we could have won more titles if Pep wouldn't have been at Bayern. Now it is pretty much the same. Imagine if he would not be here, we probably could have won at least one more league title, but I am not like this, thank God." And when you think of some of the biggest matches in European football, every league has a marquee matchup, sometimes 2 that come to mind. But with the form that both Liverpool and Manchester City are in, the managers at the peak of their powers, their respective squads, and based on the fact that they always deliver, Manchester City versus Liverpool, for me at least, has become the match that I look forward to the most when it comes to rivalries. And again, it's not a historic rivalry, it's one that's simply born out of competition. It's not something that we would cover in Roots of the Rivalry. There's no cultural, religious, socioeconomic, or what have you division between the two. I mean, maybe you could argue, yes, there's a rivalry between the two cities of Liverpool and Manchester, but in football, as far as rivalries go, Liverpool and Manchester City was never really a rivalry that you would look to prior to City becoming the team that it is now. But when you think back to some of the best matches of the last 5 years or so, plenty of them would be clashes between City and Liverpool, with that 2017-18 Champions League tie being one of my favorites of all time as a neutral. Where Guardiola helped cement City as a behemoth in England and a top competitor in Europe, Jurgen has cemented Liverpool as a constant problem in Europe and is working on dominance domestically as well. This season could be a turning point in that regard, as Liverpool are still in the hunt for a 4-trophy season, but they'll need some help from the rest of the Premier League if they want that league title. Again, despite being with Liverpool since 2015, it almost feels as though Klopp is just getting started. With every year that passes, the squad grows stronger and deeper, and the same can absolutely be said of Manchester City, as Liverpool and City are constantly trying to outdo each other. It's a rivalry that's fun to watch, thanks to how close they are. We've seen City edge Liverpool by a point before, and we could potentially see another point or two separating the two sides one way or another again this season. With Sean Dyche getting the sack, Jurgen Klopp became the longest-serving manager in the Premier League currently, with Guardiola not far behind him. This is a rarity in modern football. A manager staying with a club for more than 2 or 3 seasons is seen as a success, while Guardiola and Klopp are touching 6 and 7 years respectively. And with Klopp signing an extension until 2026, that would see him in charge for 11 years should he see it out. Well, almost 11 if you want to get technical. Guardiola's contract runs out next season, but we won't be robbed of any further clashes between the two if Guardiola gets his wish. When asked if the rumors surrounding him taking the Brazil national team job were true, Guardiola said, quote, "I'm under contract here. I'm so happy here.
I'm so happy, believe me.
I'm willing to stay forever here. Cannot be a better place to be. I'd extend the contract 10 years. While the contract isn't signed, it looks like we'll have more Klopp vs Guardiola in the future. And thankfully so, because we've spoken a lot about Liverpool, but Manchester City and what Guardiola has done with that team, how well they've played, some of the seasons they've had have been some of the most dominant, impressive seasons in the Premier League era. We need more of that. Well, unless you're a Chelsea, United, Tottenham, etc. supporter, then you're kind of sick of the sight of them. The rivalry between Guardiola and Klopp is very much different from that of Ferguson versus Wenger, as that was not only a competitive rivalry, but a very personal rivalry as well. One between both the managers and the squads. Arsene said it best himself, actually, when speaking to TalkSport in 2020, as he said, quote, "It was a time where the Arsenal players were Arsenal players for life. The Liverpool players were Liverpool players for life, and the Man United players were Man United players for life. So that, of course, exacerbated the rivalry because it was you owe me, and you hated each other. On top of that, you had characters. You speak of Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira. Keane was always on the fringe of violence, even if he was a great player. The rivalry between me and Alex, I was a foreign manager coming in and disturbing his reign, and he didn't like it. He hated to lose, and I hated to lose, so at one stage, it went overboard." And he's not wrong. Ferguson would often point to Wenger coming from the Japanese league as some sort of insult on numerous occasions, saying he was a novice, that he should keep his opinions to just Japanese football, etc. After Pizzagate, Ferguson called Wenger a disgrace, to which Wenger replied, "He has lost all sense of reality. He is going out looking for a confrontation, then asking the person he is confronting to apologize." Guardiola versus Klopp doesn't have this kind of edge to it. Not yet, at least. Who knows? Perhaps after a few more years of competing, they'll grow tired of the sight of each other and the nasty words will start to come out. But as of now, it's mostly just respect and some pain in the ass comments. Guardiola and Klopp have only gone as far as some light complaints about each other, but even then, they're complaints aimed at how good the other is. Nothing about the character, a lost sense of reality, a hate for the other squad, etc. Regardless, the Premier League is blessed to have two of the best managers in the world, probably the top 2 managers in the world, at least in my opinion, going to battle. Rivalry breeds increased competition. It forces the two to get constantly better and better. I do sometimes wonder if Messi and Ronaldo didn't have each other to drive them to constantly to improve and reach ridiculous heights, whether they would have reached the heights that they both managed to achieve in their careers. The same could be said of Guardiola and Klopp now, probably the best managerial rivalry in the world right now, at least from a competitive point of view, remember, as it is far more balanced in this moment. In fact, it's much more like the early years of the Wenger versus Ferguson rivalry, but without the personal attacks on each other, without the brawls, and elevated to the point where both teams are consistently battling not only for the title of best team in England, but for the best team in the world. But that said, which rivalry do you prefer, Klopp versus Guardiola or the nostalgia of Ferguson versus Wenger? Very, very different rivalries, but rivalries all the same. Beyond that, I want to thank you for joining me. Use that thumbs up button as a tip jar if you enjoyed the content, and subscribe if you want more from us from here at Rabona TV. As always, I'm Adrian. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday for the weekend recap. Ciao.